Drug Law Enforcement Agency impounds motorcycles loaded with suspected cannabis. WHO says distribution of equitable vaccine is threat to all nations. And Uganda reimposes strict lockdown to curb COVID-19 surge. This and more coming on the World Today newscast. Hello, this is the World Today newscast with me, Mariama Cham, and thanks for joining us. Operatives of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency in the West Coast region on Sunday ambushed 2 motorbikes suspected with drug crimes. What is understood as undercover operation was launched in the outskirts of Bijaran, a border village with southern Senegal. Drug enforcement officers impounded 2 motorcycles fully loaded with 181 bundles and some quantities of suspected cannabis sativa. More on this report by Binta Jallo.
This operation stemmed from a similar interception of suspected drugs last week by the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency in what appears as a first fight against illicit drug and trafficking in the Gambia. The undercover method is usually the final resort to hold major players in the drug trafficking web accountable for choosing the opposite side of the law. The one done over the weekend resulted to interception of what is suspected as cannabis sativa bound for further peddling or consumption in the Gambia. Although from the southern Senegal, it was not established as to the source of the suspected drug and from whom it was packed. One of the motorcycles failed to display a valid registration number while the other don't have any legal identity at the moment of their arrest. Both suspects are currently at large while investigators probing into the matter are closely working with the police to establish ownership of the motorbikes. The Drug Demand Reduction Officer NCA3 Lamin K. Bojang said the agency is not just stopping at the arresting stage as their efforts are being supplemented with training of health workers to help rehabilitate victims of drug.
They are only after the monetary part of it. There are some pushermen, like we call them pushermen, people who are involved in these things. They don't even smoke cannabis. They only sell it to have money. So they entice young people, lure them into using it until they get addicted. And once they get addicted, they cannot easily quit. So if once you get addicted to these drugs, to quit is not an easy thing. You need an assistance from a rehabilitation center, from qualified personnel to help you. Right now, there are people that Drug Law Enforcement Agency have trained together with mental health unit of the medical and health services and some social workers from the social welfare. They've done a 1-year training on addiction to serve as addiction professionals. But we are planning to have a rehabilitation center where young people that are addicted to drugs will be taken into and then assisted so that by the time they come out, they will be able to fully, forget about drug abuse and so on and then concentrate on something meaningful.
And CA3 Jobate advised youth to stay away from drugs, urging them to engage in something more meaningful than taking the risk in drug.
The advice I want to give to the young people of this country is that we can live without drugs and we can be successful without drugs. We can enjoy our lives without drugs. So what I want to tell them is let us just turn our backs towards just, cannabis and related activities, drugs in general.
On the issue of disposal of the drugs seized from dealers, Jobate had this to say.
That's just an assumption by people who don't know. I think the best thing they should have done is to inquire from Drug Law Enforcement Agency what happened to these drugs. Now, these drugs, what happened to them is very simple, because they move from one state to the other. Like if drugs are arrested, they are with they are under the custody of the Drug Law Enforcement Agency. But once the matter is taken to court, because these are substances that you need to present in court at least to substantiate your claims against the individual. So once it is at the court, it is under the custody of the court. So when the case is finally decided, court will hand the substance back to Drug Law Enforcement Agency. Then we will keep it. Then at the end of the year, cases that have been decided and concluded by the court, a day is selected when we invite the general public, and the day is called Drug Destruction Day. We usually invite the media, both print and electronic, the general public, diplomats that are in this country, and the general public to come and see the destruction. And before we destroy these drugs, we also test them on the ground to prove that they are drugs. Because we don't want to gather people and say, this is cannabis, we're going to destroy it. We destroy it like that. No. We have a scientific unit that comes on the ground. They will test these drugs on the ground to confirm, yes, this is cannabis sativa. It is tested and confirmed that one is packed. This is suspected cocaine. It is tested and confirmed it is cocaine. This is heroin. It is tested and confirmed. Then they are destroyed in the presence of everybody.
These substances pose serious threats to development and security in West Africa, according to experts. In order to cope this menace, the Gambia's Drug Law Agency has vowed to leave no stone unturned, including the management of stakeholders in the supply suppression front. It is, however, grappling with challenges in terms of mobility and civic engagement, among others. For iAfrica News, Binti Jallo.
Now, World Health Organization's Director General has raised concern over the inequitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines in countries around the world. High-income countries have administered almost 44% of the vaccine doses, while low-income countries have done so at just 0.04%. Daisy has the rest of that.
WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has once shown dissatisfaction over the inequitable distribution of world's COVID-19 vaccines. Half of the vaccine has been administered by high-income countries, while low-income countries have little or no access to the vaccines, a situation he described as a threat to all nations.
In countries with the greatest access to vaccines, we're seeing a decline in mortality among older age groups. In these countries, the public health and social measures that have helped to protect people are being eased, but they must be eased cautiously and adjusted in line with viral circulation and response capacities. With the increased global transmission of variants of concern, including the Delta variant, lifting restrictions too quickly could be disastrous for those who are not vaccinated. But many countries don't have that option because they don't have enough vaccines. In these countries, the continued use of tailored public health measures is the best way to suppress transmission.
Although there is a steady decrease in the mortality rates, especially among older people, Dr. Tedros believes that it is still too early to ease all restrictions.
The inequitable distribution of vaccines has allowed the virus to continue spreading, increasing the chances of a variant emerging that renders vaccines less effective. 6 months since the first vaccines were administered, high-income countries have administered almost 44% of the world's doses. Low-income countries have administered just 0%. The most frustrating thing about this statistic is that it hasn't changed in months. Inequitable vaccination is a threat to all nations, not just those with the fewest vaccines.
Chief Scientist at the World Health Organization, Dr. Sumaya cautioned that though the vaccine can prevent one from suffering from the virus, it doesn't necessarily stop one from getting infected or passing the virus to other people.
While these vaccines do reduce the chances of infection, they are not 100%. And so even if you've had 2 vaccines and you are protected from getting severe disease or ending up in the hospital, you might not be protected from getting the infection and passing it on to others. And there is a tendency, or there's a natural tendency for people to think once they've had the vaccine that they are protected, and there is a tendency to drop your guard and to stop taking all the measures like the mask wearing and the distancing that one would have done otherwise.
Equitable access to safe and effective vaccines is critical in ending the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the vaccination does not guarantee the need to throw safety measures away. The COVID-19 outbreak has seen over 174 million cases worldwide and more than 3 million deaths since 2019. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Cisse.
South Africa is set to join the list of countries that are initiating plans to introduce digital currency in the market. Despite the growing demand among stakeholders for its usage, the country's central bank says it is not prepared for the new digital transformation. As the digital transformation continues, the Rainbow Nation will find it difficult not to join the trend. And details of that in this report.
South Africa is joining a growing number of central banks in both emerging and developed countries who are looking into the feasibility of offering digital currencies directly to customers.
90% of central banks around the world are currently looking into this. The reason for the central banks doing these is as a direct response to many things that's happened in the financial world. First of all, unprecedented times we're moving into in terms of monetary policy and fiscal policy around the world, and as well as financial technologies that really came out of the blue and is taking over.
Central banks don't deal with customers directly, but a central bank digital currency would mean a new relationship. A CBDC is a form of electronic cash linked to a sovereign currency, protected by monetary policy and inflation targeting. While the central bank isn't ready to introduce a digital currency just yet, some experts believe they should.
The central banks need to look out of the box. In time, there's things like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and soft fintech solutions that's seeing the light these days, taking over things that central banks used to do.
If you a central bank or an entity or central bank, it's positive, efficient form of action in terms of speed, of cost, etc., and also great implication, in my view, for monetary policy that can be implemented.
User access by the central bank moves a digital currency inevitable as South Africa seeks financial trends, but the announcement is clear that the process is no more than a.
You can reach a audience, you can bank people to get a bank account for whatever reason, and we know that billion adults around the world are not banked. There's lots of barriers to entry to them because actually connectivity in itself is not really a barrier.
Some envisage the experts warn of risks on privacy. CBD can also open up to the effects of monetary policy decisions directly. There's also risks to liquidity.
Now, in a bid to fast-track its COVID-19 vaccination program, Tunisia has introduced a mobile immunization campaign with the aim of overcoming the virus in different parts of the country. The new initiative also will enable more people vaccinated against the virus, especially those in serious health complications. Authorities have urged citizens to register on the vaccination program as more than 1 million COVID-19 vaccines have been administered so far since March 2021. Details of that in this report.
The regional health department set up near-to-home vaccination centers for the elderly and the handicapped. The project targets more than 10,000 people. Tunisian medics and paramedics welcomed the initiative.
The mobile vaccination campaign is faster and more efficient than the traditional one. The registration and vaccination lasts a few minutes. This operation has made our work easier. This is a good start.
Many senior citizens who are reluctant to go to some distant vaccination centers are now getting inoculated in their own neighborhoods.
The vaccination is very important. It's saving lives across Tunisia. The mobile service allows people in critical health condition to get inoculated anywhere. The pandemic will not end without vaccination.
The Minister of Health declared that over 1 million COVID-19 vaccines have been administered since the start of the campaign in March. Meanwhile, more than 2 million people have registered on the national vaccination platform evax.tn.
We'll increase the number of mobile vaccination centers and provide more vaccines from different sources and laboratories. We urge all citizens to register on the National Vaccination Platform to get inoculated and to flatten the curve of coronavirus.
According to the COVID-19 task force, 272,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine will be delivered in June, as well as 50,000 doses of the Sputnik V vaccine. In addition, Tunisia will receive 500,000 doses of the Sinovac vaccine this month. Tunisia has launched the National COVID-19 Vaccination Registry Project. The goal of the project is to provide detailed information about people who are being vaccinated, as well as side effects. The health department plans to vaccinate more than 3 million people in the next few months.
In order to protect children and youth from the dangerous routes to the west, Protégem, a project funded by the European Union, is active in the country. Implemented in 4 countries of the West African sub-region, including Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire and Guinea, the project advocates for access to social services. Ndaisise reports.
Migration continues to take its toll in African sub-region as youth and children across national and international borders in search of green pasture. They do despite the implied hardship and struggle they encounter during their journeys. Migrants, especially children, have little or no access to social services and assistance despite their vulnerability. Protégem pledged to change the narrative by raising awareness about the protection and safety issue for youth and children on migration routes. The regional project manager, Anais El Basil, explained their objectives and offers.
The main objective is to enhance the protection that those children and youth get while they are along the migratory routes, to make sure that they have an effective access to social services, to assistance, to make sure that the key protection stakeholders, being institutional or community-led, know about the vulnerabilities and the protection needs of children and youth on the move in those 4 countries, to create protection mechanisms, etc. In the Gambia, more specifically, we are intervening in the regions of Soma and Farafeni. Yes, and we work in close collaboration with the Department of Social Welfare and with the CCPCs, Community Child Protection Committees in Soma and Farafeni. And globally or nationally in the Gambia, we work with the Ministry of Social Welfare in very close coordination.
Certain migratory routes are very dangerous and risky. As a result, assistance is being offered to those who cannot do without the option of migration. As Anis explains, the project hopes to create a stronger and protective environment for children and youth along the migration routes.
The project is implemented for a duration of 3 years, and our main objective after 3 years is really to create a stronger protective environment for children and youth along the migratory routes, because the Gambia is a country where there is a lot of internal migration. People move from one region most of the time to Banjul or vice versa, but it's also a very important transit country. People pass through Gambia to go whether to Senegal or to other countries of the sub-region, and it's also a very important country of departure. There are many Gambian children or young people who move to Senegal, sometimes also more up higher to the northern countries.
The phenomenon of children and youth migrating to never leave experience, with figure of such cases standing about 75% movement from regions to urban centers. Although migration creates opportunities, it also puts children at risk of exploitation, abuse and trafficking. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Ndaisise.
J. Balaji Enterprise on Tuesday donated assortment of equipment to the Mobile Traffic Department of the Gambia Police Force. The goodwill gesture includes high visibility traffic jackets, traffic cones and solar touch lights. Details in this report.
despite the many concerns and complaints on routine traffic congestion hindering movement of goods and services within the Greater Banjul area. The role of traffic police is on increasing demand. Assistant Inspector General of Police Ibrahim Abbar received the material support as a timely intervention for the traffic department. He unmarked J. Balaji as a regular supporter of the police with the needed materials in the law enforcement drive.
This gesture is a clear demonstration of your commitment to national security, because national security, the police is always taking a lead in national security. Anybody coming to the assistance and support of the police has a stake in making sure we have a crime-free society. The equipment donated today, as highlighted by the MC, ranging from traffic cones, reflector jackets, flashlights, etc., we go a long way in enhancing the operational capacity of the mobile traffic department. As we all know, traffic and traffic issues have become a nightmare for the Gambia, particularly in the urban area, and most notably during the rush hours.
Ram Mohab, the Honorary Consul of India in the Gambia, acknowledged the hospitality of the Gambians, paving a strong bond with Indians living in the country. He commended Mr. Balaji for taking it upon himself to empower the police in his own little means on behalf of the Indian community in the Gambia.
I would like to commend especially Mr. Raja Narendra and Mr. Cham of J. Balaji Company here, who have taken this effort to bring about this equipment as a gesture of the solidarity that the Indian community shows. He has invited other business leaders and has excited us to also contribute something to this effort. So here, this little gesture is not the end of partnership. It is, I think, a larger beginning. I think more companies seeing what J. Balaji is doing here will come forward with much more in the near future.
As the primary domestic intelligence security and law enforcement body in the Gambia, the police force is expected to deliver its services to the people on a 24 basis, with the traffic department becoming what people cannot go without. For iAfrica News, I am Fatoumata Kasim.
That goodwill gesture by J. Balaji Enterprise to the Gambia Police Force Mobile Traffic Department will take us to a quick break, and we'll be right back with the rest of the news on the wall today.
The pride we take in our brand, the work we put into constantly change the landscape and elevate real estate in the Gambia, it's compared to none. From inception, our goal was to add value to the beautiful Gambian landscape. That's why we are proud innovators of community estates. Kololi Sands is an exceptional piece of work, tailored for ultimate convenience and luxury, to bring you an element of finesse that is rare but unique in its own. This is also our pride and joy, and we welcome you to the exquisite beauty right here in Kololi and right here on the waterfront. Kololi Sands, feel the ocean breeze at your doorstep.
Welcome back, and you're still watching the World Today newscast. Now, the Ugandan government has declared a new coronavirus measures as part of efforts to contain the new surging infections in the country. Inter-district travels and public gatherings such as schools are shut down to help limit the spread of the virus. Like many other countries, the East African country is also faced with shortage of vaccines to immunize more people against the virus. Details in this report.
There was a visible rush of parents picking their children up from school after the closure of all education institutions as the new measures took effect on Monday. Some of these students were only 3 weeks into a new school term.
It has affected us too much Yeah, as in you have concentrated, you are trying to catch up with the teachers, yeah, catching up with the notes, and you are in moods of books.
Some parents worry their children are more at risk of harm away from school.
Government should have been more strict on schools. We are taking the children home. We work away from our homes. We shall instead be bringing the disease to the children.
But school infections have been a major concern. There has also been an increase in cases among young people, most aged between 20 and 39 years. Health officials say the poor compliance to the standard operating procedures like washing hands and wearing a face mask have led to a surge in cases. The capital Kampala is the most affected, registering an average 500 cases per day. To curb further spread, inter-district travels have also been banned, except for the metropolitan part of the capital Kampala. Religious gatherings and weekly open markets are suspended too.
Travel from Category A countries, as defined by the Minister of Health, remains suspended except for returning Ugandans. At the moment, only India is listed as Category A.
The restrictions will be implemented for 42 days. Despite efforts to curb the spread through vaccination, vaccine shortages have hampered progress so far. Over 748,000 people have received their first dose. An additional 175,000 doses from the COVAX facility are expected this month.
In addition, government will secure 300,000 doses of Sinovac vaccine donated by our friends, the Chinese government. But I want to buy. I don't want to depend on donations. We shall buy. We shall buy from Johnson & Johnson, the Americans, from these Chinese, and even from the Russians.
The government hopes to vaccinate at least 21 million people over the next 12 months.
A joint delegation from the African Union, Economic Community of Central African States, United Nations and the European Union began a 4-day visit to the Central African state. The delegation is in Bangui to discuss peace and stability of the country following heavy violence in the country. Details in this report.
The Central African Republic had the elections for both presidential and national assembly in December 2020. However, voting was not able to take place in many areas of the country that were controlled by armed groups. A high delegation from the African Union, Economic Community of Central African States, United Nations and European Union arrived in Bangui to discuss peace, stability and security of the Central African Republic. After many demonstrations, they were wondering whether the invitations that had been extended to them are still valid, but President Touadéra said they need their partners. According to Bankole Adiore, Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the African Union, they were reassured that the President of the Republic affirmed that the work of the international community is still valid and necessary for peace and stability of the Central African Union. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the UN Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, said the United Nations deemed it important for the efforts aimed at responding to the humanitarian situation in the Central African Republic. The delegation will also meet with civil society, women, youth, religious and political party representatives and diplomats in Bangui, as well as hold talks with the custodians of the CAR political agreement for peace. Reporting for iAfrica News, Amindao.
The Youth Coordinator and Advocacy Focal Person of Child Protection Alliance says laws against child labor in the Gambia are not enforced. Lyman Seidi made this remark during an interview with our reporter Ndai Sise ahead of the 2021 World Child Labor Day, and she files in this report.
World Child Labor Day is observed annually on the 12th June to pay attention on child labor and means to eradicate the practice. This is significant as it helps in raising awareness about the harmful mental and physical problem faced by children across the world. As the commemoration draws nearer, the Youth Coordinator and Advocacy Focal Person of Child Protection Alliance, Lamin K. Sedi, is of the view that Laws against child labor in the Gambia are not enforced. He called on authorities to refocus attention in protecting the rights and welfare of children in the country.
So we have very good laws, but implementation, enforcement of laws are the issue. But they have set out clear punishments for people who, I mean, even employ children. I mean, there are clear cut provisions in our laws, but they are not enforced. They are not monitored. They are not. The institutional frameworks are not there to have those laws in place.
In different contexts, children could be seen as breadwinners for many families who rely on their labor due to high levels of poverty. Child Protection Alliance officials urge parents to by all means prevent their children from engaging in hard labor no matter the poverty status.
You know, for us, we believe first parents have to understand the consequences of their actions, of taking children responsible for their feeding, for their all those issues that the family may need. Once children are responsible of this, it becomes difficult because they would have to go and get it out. How they get it out becomes the issue now. And that's why you have children venture into all these issues.
Children could be also found carrying out different forms of child labor in the Gambia, a situation Mr. Saidi has labeled as dangerous enough to paralyze career dreams of the young ones.
Of course, child labor comes in different categories. For example, you have children who may be engaged into petty trading. You may have children who may be doing domestic work and so forth. But having worst forms of child labor would be children working in deep seas, child prostitution, and so forth. This constitute worst forms of child labor, and we have all this in the Gambia, really.
This year's World Child Labor Day focuses on actions for 2021 International Year for the elimination of child labor. According to reports, 182 on the worst forms of child labor is known to have been taking place when the COVID-19 crisis was reversing progress made in tackling the problem. It is estimated that there are 152 million victims of child labor worldwide. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am DCC.
That report by Uganda Covid-19 on Child Protection Alliance saying that laws governing child labor in the Gambia are not being enforced brings us to the end of the World Today newscast. I am Mariama Cham. Thanks for your company and goodbye for now.